What's up, guys? I've been a host for 10 years on Airbnb. And as an arbitrage host, I've had some terrible guests, I've had terrible landlords, and even other competitors have really done some absolutely wild stuff. And I want to share you some of my crazy stories. And I'll start with my very first party, because that'll be the fun one. And then the next one is actually going to blow your mind. It was crazy. I should have put this guy in jail. But hi, guys, my name is Sean Rocky G. This is the biggest channel for Airbnb education, and my students have made over $1 billion. You guys have heard the whole story. But my first party, I had a property in Houston at a building called Sky House. This was before leases said that you're not allowed to do Airbnb in the leases, right? And so I had 3 properties that I already rented for my previous company where I built sales teams, and we turned those into Airbnbs because they were just losing money in the newspaper world. Long story, right? What's up, Boostly? You guys you're up late, dude. Isn't it like midnight in the UK right now? Good to see you guys. Airbnb's not dying, Steven. We can talk about that too. But my first party was in this high rise, and these studios are like 450 square feet. And the night that the party happened, about 60 people checked in with concierge to get let up the elevator into this little studio apartment. And concierge was confused because Airbnb, nobody knew what Airbnb was. So all these people were checking into concierge to go up the elevator and through this gigantic party in this 450 square foot studio. And when I went to clean the next day, dude, it was nasty. I learned what 10 grand was. There's these little individual bottles of 10 grand, which is like a mix of like Hennessy and vodka or something. And the floors were completely sticky. It's like they spilled punch all over the place. They messed up the furniture, of course, because when you spill like juice and stuff into furniture, you stain the couches and stuff. And that was my very first party. And it offended me so bad that I started to get like really shitty on social media about it. I was like, man, this is terrible, because the guests were like hood, you know? And I just really didn't know how to handle that. I felt like they were destroying my business, and I got really offended. But it got worse. It got worse fast. There was a kid from Rice University in Houston that decided to set up some Airbnb properties, steal my identity, and list properties identical to mine. He found furniture as close to look-alike to mine so he could copy my exact photos, and made 2 listings that looked exactly like my other listings, right? So that way he could piggyback on mine, used my profile photo and everything. And this kid, I can't remember what his name is. I haven't saved my phone. And it took me weeks to find this guy. But we found out about him because this Asian couple from overseas came to check in, and they couldn't get their check-in information, and they didn't understand like the way that this guy was running his thing. You had to go to a restaurant nearby to pick up an envelope for your keys, because he didn't want anybody like catching him. So you'd go off-site to get the keys. Well, this Asian couple checked in like after midnight. The restaurant was closed. They couldn't get to the keys. So the concierge is calling me saying, hey, one of your Airbnb guests can't check in. And I'm like, I don't have this guest in my system. We have no clue who this is. And of course, Airbnb is trying to figure it out. And of course, it's not my profile. And so I go on the hunt to find out who this guy is. I even then eventually book his listing in order to get his phone number, and then cancel, of course, the booking. Call the guy and say, dude, you are committing a crime. This is fraud. And he, without missing a beat, he's like, dude, how do you do it? How do you get properties to let you in to do Airbnb? I've been trying to figure it out, and they won't let me do it. He didn't care that he was committing a crime. He had just no remorse at all. And he just was thinking that I would give him free game while he was just like stealing my identity. And that was actually like within a year into the business model. I was like a host for a year or less, and this dude still stole my identity. It was less than a year later that I had the first time that somebody ever stole all my furniture. So the first theft that happened is I had this mid-rise apartment in Houston, and this group stayed for like 7 days or 8 days, which was plenty of time, right? And over the course of 8 days, they removed every item of furniture from that property. They removed all the kitchen stuff. They removed everything. We walked in, and there was like 2 things left in the property. And you know what? Airbnb paid for it all. Airbnb back then gave us no trouble. They're like, sure, fine, here's like $7,000 for it. So my very first 3 crazy stories were just from Houston. Another notable one is I had a lady who booked on Airbnb for like a month, and she was a travel nurse, but then she was doing like contract, like emergency NICU stuff. And so she wasn't traveling, but she was contract. And next thing you know, she just started extending with me. And I had a 2-bedroom property that she was giving me like $5,000 a month. For like 14 months, she paid me $5 grand a month for an Airbnb property. She was one of my second or third reservations. And then for the rest of the lease, I didn't have it on Airbnb. It was like completely direct. I eventually had to evict her at the very, very end. That was no fun, but she made me so much money through to the end of that it worked out just fine. It was kind of crazy. Now, Fort Worth. My first crazy story for Fort Worth was a lady I also had to evict. So this girl booked on Airbnb, and I think she got our information through one of our housekeepers or something like that. And the girl was like having a hard time, divorce, drug addiction, something like that. And so she moved in, and within a week, she tried to squat after being there for basically a week. And I called the police, so like it's a civil matter. So I go try to confront her, and I knock on the door, and she opens up the door naked, right? She tried to do this, like, Mr. Landlord, I'm this like victim lady, and maybe I don't know, she maybe was gonna try to seduce me or something, and I was just like completely stunned. I'm like, I'm closing this door, you're gonna put clothes on, the cops are gonna be here in 20 minutes. And basically with the police, I kind of forced my way into the property and proved that she didn't have tenants' rights and got her out. But that woman was wild. Also in Fort Worth, I had a guy who came in for medical. He came in for medical stuff, was staying for a few months. And he died just of natural medical causes, but we had no clue that he died. Which is real quiet. And then at one point he was like, he didn't renew, right? And they were like, dude, you didn't okay, message us back. Like, we need you to give the place back or extend. And the building went in to check on the guy or to just check on the property. And the dude had been dead for like days. And his dog was there. Right, the dog was like standing over the body, protecting the body. Who knows how long the dog had been starving for? And that one was like the first like heartbreaking thing that I ever saw. That was a really rough one as a host. And so those were my crazy Texas stories up until like 2018. That was still just my very first like 3 years. Now, it was Philadelphia that really started to take the cake on crazy stuff. Philadelphia, the landlords are super sketchy. So as soon as I got in, one of the very first deals I did, one of the landlords signed a lease agreement that gave me 2 months of rent for free. We agreed on that for 12 doors. He gave me 1 door first. And then the next 4 doors we were supposed to get 2 weeks later, his lawyer was like, sorry, there's a delay with the leases. And we had already ordered all the furniture. And this is where I learned the concept of signing something under duress. This was super important in court, by the way. This is my first battle with Greystar as well. So the guy delayed the leases, and I've got furniture coming one day, and we're already a week and a half late to get these leases signed. And I show up and I'm like, I have people coming with furniture today. We had an agreement. I need these leases so I can get the keys. And so they hand me some leases, but they left out the part of the agreement that gave me 2 months of rent for free. And they modified those 4 leases to say that short-term rentals weren't allowed, even though we negotiated a 12-month deal or a 12 lease deal where they were, and the first lease said I was allowed to. So then what he tried to do 2 months later is say that I owed him 2 months of rent that I didn't owe, and he wanted to try to force that money out of me or he would evict me. And he tried to have this ace in his sleeve that said, well, these leases say that you can't Airbnb, so give me this 2 months of rent. It was like a really shady move. And so Greystar tried to evict us. I had to lawyer up. We went to court. I was able to prove that the first deal that gave us permission, and I was able to show the lease concession for the first deal and show that we had made no different negotiation sense and that all 12 units were negotiated on the spot. So Greystar gave up. They did not try to evict me, but here's something you guys need to know. If Greystar ever tries to evict you, then you're blacklisted. So that LLC could never sign a lease with Greystar ever again. And that's where I learned that you should have multiple LLCs that you should season. So start an LLC, get some cash flow, and do your arbitrage thing. But the moment you have like a decent amount of leases, like say 20, have another LLC and start to put cash flow in that. So you have another lease that could also sign some leases. Because we still do Greystar deals to this day, just not with that LLC because it got blacklisted. And it seems that almost every major landlord that I did business with in Philly did something shady. So that guy did that. And then my next major landlord did a deal where both myself and Sonder, we both rented, Sonder rented a whole building, but then I rented 25 doors from him in a different building, okay? Now the regular tenants did not like this. They did not like that there were so many short-term rentals in this 3-building property. And because they wanted to push back and say, hey, we're gonna push back against the city or his mortgage, he decides to try to kick us out. So what he did that was shady, he basically signed 25 leases to me where each individual lease was signed to me as my person, even though we had a company. He left out the fact that we were a company. Then he gave me $500,000 in discounts. I think it was actually closer to 600,000 in lease concessions he gave me between free rents and rent discounts. But he had to hide that from his mortgage company, so he had a third-party group that would pay a portion of my rent. So the leases said that the rent was $2,400, but I was only going to pay $1,850, and another company was going to pay the other $550 a month. That's essentially fraud, I think. And so when all of the local tenants said that they were going to complain, he was going to get in trouble for multiple things. First, he broke the 10% cap on corporate leases for his property because his mortgage would not allow him to have that many commercial leases. And he gave me 25 out of 70 doors, right? And if the bank found that out, then they would have looked into everything and found out that he lied and cooked the books somewhere else too. And he could have probably went to jail. And so he basically locked me out of 25 properties. We had picked up 22 of the 25. We had 3 left that we were going to still furnish by the time this happened. So he locked us out of 22 properties. And he stole all my furniture. I never got that furniture back. I took him to court for 2 years. He gave my furniture to some guy who was a felon. And then I had to basically sue him. And we settled, and he gave me a big check. I'm not going to say who this is or any other circumstances because I do have a non-disparagement agreement from this deal where I'm not allowed to get too specific or talk bad about this guy. But it's long enough ago, I don't think anybody can figure it out. And so, yeah, I had to take that guy to the, I still didn't make all my money back. Suing somebody for 2 years cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And my furniture was like $100,000 of stuff, and I still didn't even get a $100,000 check, not quite. So I lost money on that deal. Even though I still took him to the cleaners on principle, I whooped his ass, and I'm proud of that. Third landlord, crazy, right? So my third problem in Philly was another landlord. After COVID, everything went to shit, and this landlord that I was working with had some really like ugly properties, stuff that he wasn't maintaining well. One of my center city apartment complexes, he had a mold problem, and the first floor, the entire wall came out because the bathrooms were in the very back. So the bathroom, whole wall for the bathroom came out, and the second floor started to erode away too. Massive mold problem. And I'm glad we got all these photos. And he wouldn't fix it. He just didn't have the money to fix it. Post-COVID, he was like strapped for cash. He was very mafia. And then we had these other 4 properties in another part of town leased through him where they got banned on Airbnb. And then when I picked these up, they tried to ban me. And this is something you guys need to know now too. When they banned me on Airbnb for listing a property where the address was flagged, I called Airbnb, said, hey, we're a new tenant to this property. We don't know what happened with it before, but here's a lease agreement that I signed with my landlord. Airbnb then unbanned both the address and unbanned me. And I was able to Airbnb a property that was previously banned, okay? And I talked to Airbnb recently about something like this, and they'll still allow it. So if a listing gets banned on Airbnb for their circumvention policy, they will allow another owner to take possession of a property and try again. So you would just have to have proof of ownership transfer. Now, where this went crazy, he told the neighborhood that they got a long-term tenant for these 4 properties, right? He's such a liar, right? And so he was doing Airbnb, he got banned on it, and the neighborhood was pissed. He's like, no, we got some long-term tenants for these properties. Don't worry, guys. But the long-term tenant was an Airbnb guy. So immediately the neighborhood's mad. And so I had to deal with that for almost a year. And then, we started giving some of these leases back because the neighborhood was fighting with us. They were just fighting. So we're like giving them back before the leases were over in order to satiate the neighborhood. Now, after we unwinded everything, he then files an insurance claim with State Farm claiming that I did $200,000 of damage to his properties. We had 10 units with him, okay? And here's what was sketchy. Every single door, all 4 houses and 6 apartments, all had roughly $20,000 of damage each. Almost a uniform number of damage for each property. And State Farm paid him. And then State Farm sued me. And I had to fight State Farm in court, right? And my lawyer said, we're gonna have to settle. State Farm never walks away without a check. They're not gonna walk away without a check. But I'm like, no, we're gonna fight back. Again, on principle. I'm ADHD, I don't care. I'm like, I'll blow $1 million on this thing. I'll blow it, because I'm innocent, right? We have the fun idea to depose these guys. And this guy's super mafia boss kind of dude. And the 2 dudes that he was working with are really kind of like squirrely guys. So my attorney, which was a beast of an attorney, by the way, deposes this guy, and he's immediately unlikable, and he starts immediately saying some really shady, stupid stuff. And then one of the guys claims that he has no clue what was going on because he was out of his mind, right? The guy was so scared to say anything in deposition that he tried to claim insanity in his deposition, right? The deposition went so bad that when State Farm saw this deposition, they're like, we'll drop the claim, we'll drop the case where you should pay us $200,000 as long as you promise not to drag our clients back into court and sue them. So I say that I beat State Farm because you never beat State Farm, and I got them to settle for $0 and just drop the thing where they're fighting against me. But I had to agree not to sue them. So that was a win, right? That was a crazy one. Like the video, please like the video for that. That's another one where I have a non-disparagement agreement where I can't say too much about it. I can't be overly specific, but I'm very proud of all three of those landlord disputes. But Philadelphia did have a situation that put me down for good. After COVID, there was a lot of gang activity, a lot of crime, a lot of parties, right? One of my properties made the news. It was in the newspaper for a party house on Airbnb, so I guess I'm partially responsible for the bad media that started the Airbnb bans in Philly. I'll take my lumps for that. But this gang started breaking into properties in Fishtown, Kensington, whatever. And it was a bunch of teenagers. They were skipping school. They even left their high school IDs. I couldn't get the police to do anything. They wouldn't ever come because I guess it wasn't a big enough deal until these kids committed murder. These kids ended up on the news for killing a 73-year-old man, beat them to death with a road cone. And you can actually look this up right now. Go to Philadelphia, kids murder 73-year-old man with road cone, and you'll find it in the news. These kids, because they murdered this guy, were part of this like gang, and the police finally called us and said, hey, we want to talk to you about these kids that have been breaking into your property. They were finally interested in what I was going through because these kids killed somebody. So we worked with the cops, showed them the property, where they're breaking in, when they're breaking in, stuff like that, and the cops cased out our building to catch these kids. And because we cooperated with the cops to help catch these kids that committed murder, and by the way, one of the girls snitched, and then they killed the girl. They killed a teenage girl for snitching on the whole murder of the 73-year-old guy thing, which was heartbreaking and tragic. And because we helped, they started going absolutely nuts. They broke into all of our properties that they could get their hands on, started like bashing in all the walls, slashing the furniture, staging these like almost like riot-like groups of people that came in just to harass us. And then one night they followed one of my housekeepers home and they jumped him and put him in the hospital, which was really sad. That was the day we decided to pull out of Philadelphia. So one of my stories was so bad, we quit hosting in Philadelphia because a gang nearly murdered one of my employees. And that's probably, I think, maybe the worst story of them all. Everything else is kind of cake at that point. I mean, we've had people bring guns into properties. We've had people leave sex toys at properties. You know, you get all the usual stuff. We had a unicorn property where bachelorette parties would stay till like 6 o'clock in the morning and just do really dumb stuff and, you know, got us kicked out of that property. One of my properties in Fort Worth, the very first night, we had 5 apartments, and the very first night we were on Airbnb, a guest had 110 people in the pool at a property in Fort Worth, and we got booted from that property immediately because our very first guest was just crazy. One time a person tried to, like, this is where I learned how to do all my eviction stuff, like some of my real cool tricks. There's a felon who started learning that you could squat in Airbnb properties. So he booked an Airbnb, stayed with us, extended a little bit, and then at one point he non-renewed and said he wouldn't leave. And this is where I got the idea to remove furniture. So I called the cops. I'm like, this guy, he's being really aggressive. He's threatening us. I know I've got to take him to court for eviction, but I've got personal items in that property. It's my property, and I need to grab my stuff, and I need a police escort. So with the police escort, we took a box truck and we removed all of our stuff. Furniture, mattresses, kitchen supplies, everything. We moved everything. And because there was no furniture, the guy left. His goal was to find a pre-furnished property to squat in because he didn't have his own furniture. And this is one of the main things you guys need to know about Airbnb evictions, is that a person with no furniture who's squatting will move on and find another property if you remove the furniture from your Airbnb. And that's where I learned that one. So I'll tell you, there's probably more to come. I've probably forgotten half of my crazy stories, but those are the ones that really stick out to me. And I'll tell you, at the end of it all, 10 years doing this, deaths and theft and lawsuits, yeah, it's still totally worth it. I actually still love this industry a lot. I love teaching it mostly, I think, more than anything. But I still really do love this industry. It's fun. Because some of my best stories, I remember one kid came to Houston, maybe the second week I was a host, from an internship. And he had just all these dreams of starting a small company. And we just sat for like an hour and a half and talked about medical tech and stuff, and sent him on his way. And then another family came from Mexico City. Their mom had cancer, and they were coming to treat her in Houston for cancer. And they were just the nicest family, right? Just they would move you at how beautiful of a family they were. And those like few and far between moments with guests, those were absolutely huge. There's one kid recently at one of our like cheaper properties, just living day to day out of Airbnbs, just trying to figure it out. He had like 3 kids, and he's your typical like had kids before he was ready, and he needed a place to stay monthly. And I started giving him some work and gave him one of our units by the month, and he got back on his feet, right? But it was really tough, and he was a huge risk. I mean, he could have been one of the guys that I would have evicted. But out of all the things that are scary, there's been a lot of amazing opportunity to do something good for somebody in this industry. We're serving people in Airbnb, which is nice. So thanks for hanging out and letting me talk to you about some of my craziest experiences. You can go back in time and see some of these things about evictions. With that said, though, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Please do like the video. It'll be great to get that, because YouTube cares about likes and engagement and stuff. You can even hit some reacts or whatever. I'm going to get back to work, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.